on? Yep, I see Councillor Forbes is on as well. Awesome. That's great. So I will call this council workshop to order. This is the council workshop for February 23rd, 2021 at 5 p.m. This meeting is to be held virtually. Council, we've circulated the resolution in the agenda package. Will someone move resolution to hold the meeting without the public in attendance?
I moved.
Moved by Councillor Hanson, second by Councillor Back. Call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. And we have an agenda that's been circulated for this evening's meeting. Are there any errors or omissions? There's only one item on it. Hearing none, call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. I might have got ahead of myself. I think moved by Councillor Curran, second by Councillor Back. There you go.
Great. Thanks, Your Worship.
Just to make us legal. Okay. Well, this is workshop number 4 on the OCP review. I see Mr. Stewart here. Mr. Stewart, do you have any opening comments for this evening's workshop?
No, Your Worship. Sorry. Other than I thought the conversation, the last workshop was quite good, and I look forward to listening to the conversation today.
Good. Thank you. Mr. Milburn, any opening comments?
Well, thank you, Your Worship, members of council. We're very excited to be back again tonight for the latest installment of our facilitated conversation. And Ms. Atfa has a brief introduction, and then Levin will be leading council through a facilitated conversation about results of some of the conversation to date, and hopefully some very interesting questions and good conversation. So thank you, Your Worship.
Mr. Milburn, Ms. Atfa.
Thank you very much, Mayor Little. Thank you, Mr. Milburn. Good evening, members of council and everybody who's able to join today. We appreciate that we've been able to have 4 official community plan targeted review workshops this month in February. February is supposed to be a short month, but actually it feels like it's been a long, hard month. An action plan is where we've always been heading. Ever since council, you gave the direction to look at these 4 interrelated areas of housing, climate emergency, employment and economy and employment, lands and transportation. And you gave the direction to focus on these areas because there were new issues that had arisen since the OCP was adopted, issues that came about through new pressures, changing conditions and emerging priorities. So we are heading towards this action plan. Next slide, please, Nicole. This slide you have seen, and when I look at it, I see that we're getting closer to that completion point. We still have work to do. And I again encourage anybody who wants to see some of the detailed work that has gone on with regards to the engagement, the white papers, various surveys, to go onto the DNV website and search for the targeted OCP review. Or you can just Google DNV OCP review and you'll get a link to all of these background documents. So Nicole Foth in Community Planning is our coordinator for this project. With the permission of Your Worship, in a couple minutes, Levin Calloward again will guide the discussion for us. As I mentioned last time, we were really happy to work with Levin because he's got a specialty in leadership and collaborative capacity and a nice way of bringing us together and raising issues. He's also one to accelerate the implementation of good practices and initiatives. And I think that captures where we're wanting to go. Next slide, please. Just a little bit of a framing for where we will go from here, starting off with that nice star and the yellow icon at the top. Last week, Levin talked with us about what's your pride in 2030 going to be? And what did you hear from others that really resonated with you? Today, we're going to look at this working list of actions and see how they're resonating with you and where your priorities and urgent areas are. We have to go back out to our community, and they've been so gracious with their time and effort so far in many different ways, and particularly with a pause due to the pandemic. But we'll need to go out and make sure check in and see if we're on the right track. When we're done the engagement, which will be this spring, we'll need to do an evaluation and a review of the actions before they actually make it into your action plan. And we'll look at a number of different objectives and criteria. This next slide, just to end up, again, we're looking at the purpose for today is refining and prioritizing a set of actions. All these actions that were pulled together from a lot of people's input and your input as well. And what we want to achieve is to continue to build that shared understanding, keep looking at these potential actions and look at prioritizing them. Lieven will come back towards a little bit later on with some key questions around these actions. Are these actions getting you where you want to go? Are they addressing the issues? And importantly, are we ready? Will we be ready soon to take these out to check in with the public? So I will stop there. Thank you again. We really appreciate you taking the time every week for this project. And I'd like to reintroduce Lieven Callawert.
Welcome, Lieven. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Little. Thank you so much, Tina, for the introduction and the framing again. It's, as I said last week, an honor to be in stage 4 of the game, workshop 4. And as also stated last week, last week was a turning point where the first 2 workshops, and in fact, the whole initiative and the whole effort of everybody to bring this to the table was conducting all of the information, bringing all the data to the table in order to prepare you as a council also to be ready to take leadership on the OCP next stage. But that's only my point of view and my reflection on last week. I really enjoyed the conversation that we were part in together last week. And I'm so happy and thrilled that we are together now with a group of 8, me just being a little conductor and facilitator, but to bring you guys together. And as what I said also last week, the shift here is to start embodying the whole OCP and the strategic plan by building that collective leadership around it. And what will we do tonight is, I really would like to start with a recap of last workshop. What did we accomplish? What did you accomplish last week? Where did we come? How could we also convene this together as a group of 7? From there, you also conducted the survey. And the survey was meant to help you make choices on all of the abundance of possibilities. What are now the most important choices and actions to choose first in order to let all of the other things happen afterwards? There's, as Tina mentioned beautifully, and then also we got some questions to the table. And very important here is, what can you experience tonight? So I had to manage some expectations. I'm here to help you embody the strategy. And that means we want to go to a convergence. So we want to go to a kind of closing point. So it's not meant to be a point and an evening to have all kinds of hefty discussions. No, this is really meant to contemplate as a group and to feel that you're all part of the decisions that are made together. So that after tonight, you don't look back in the mirror again and say, oh, if I would have had. No. It's a point to say, wow, we built the car. We're going to drive in that direction and we know what we have in our car. And in order to use even another metaphor, where we built some oxygen last week and also some heartbeats, you now want to build the legs and the arms around the body in order to move forward. And don't panic. There's fingers on it that's going to emerge. There's also toes and knees and other things. But today we want to put the arms and the legs on the body so that you can move forward to that. And so if we might have a conversation tonight that is really intense but soft at the same time, that's the goal. The goal is to bring you to agreement. The goal is to bring you to a collective body of knowledge, but also a collective body of decision to say, okay, we as a council are the backbone for this OCP. We confirm that these are our decisions. And with this, we can build further for the upcoming 2 years. And so in order to go further on that, I want to go back 1 week to last week, also to bring you up to speed. What were the results? What did we accomplish last week? So Nicole, if I can have the next slide, please. Last workshop, I asked you 2 questions, and I want to start with the second one. And that's, what did you hear in your colleagues' aspirations that resonated with you? And if you still remember, the question was at the table about your age in 9 years' time. What would be the greatest thing that you could hear when you meet people into one or another party? What would be the greatest compliment you could receive in what you accomplished with you, yourself, and your colleagues together? And this is what resonated with you when you heard your colleagues speak. And I just repeat them as a mirror. So you're now going to see 3 sheets and 3 slides that are the results of your work from last week, your words, but these are the tests. These are the mirror to look into with all of the actions that you chose. So this actions chosen, that's the second part of tonight. Will these actions be the answer to accomplish this? So first thing, you want to be seen as a group that has brought forward the thing that change is needed. You brought a shift forward. You brought a welcome feeling to business and innovation, a healthier, safer neighborhoods with needs locally met nearby. You brought transformation at an incremental pace. You brought more housing diversity. You brought many areas of agreement, social, jobs, housing, and reconciliation to the table as a council, and thus also for your citizens. You considered single family areas with need for diversity. There's diversity and inclusion present. There's the ending of the reliance on personal cars. There's a community of opportunity that has been created. There's partnerships established much stronger with First Nations. And there's responsible finances at the table. And for your own minds, there might be 2 monkeys now jumping on all of your shoulders. One monkey is saying, oh, great. And the other one will say, okay, this is the 15th time I hear these things. Go on. But this little monkey on your right shoulder is an important one. This is not a repetition, as I said last week. This is coming closer from a vision to an ambition. And an ambition is your oxygen in order to be credit-worthy to move forward. So this is what resonated. This is your oxygen to move forward. If we translate this into more tangibles also, this is what you guys said as the real achievements you want to have. Nicole, next slide, please. One, the district is welcoming to new people. And it's a place of opportunity, and we have great connections with each other. Full stop. That's what people say, that's what you say, repeatedly. Second, there's a more diverse and inclusive community, and it's reflected on council. There's a greater variety and diversity of housing. There's progress and investment in active transportation, so a personal vehicle isn't needed. On the climate action, you hit the CEP targets and have a better understanding of our planet. You're working towards reconciliation and learning from Indigenous leaders. And you're known as a welcoming place for businesses with employment lands reserved. And all of this having been said, what's very important in leadership and in collective leadership, if this is the oxygen of what you want to bring, what is the heartbeat? And remember, I used one expression last week. That's people and leaders are never remembered for what they do or for what they say, but how they make people feel. And this next slide is coming closest to what all of you said last week in your shared desire. The shared desire is how do you want other people to feel because of your choices you're gonna make. And this might sound very, very soft, but this is where you make a difference as a leader or as a council. If you can bring this over in the feelings of the people in the district, then you accomplish your results. And there's 3 building blocks there. The first one is, our love for this community is what we have in common. Talking about a heartbeat. That's shared by all of you, or by the 5 people that were present, and I want to give the floor to the 7 of you also to embrace this. It drives you to work for a better world. It guides us to make decisions with the needs of future generations in our minds. This is the heartbeat that makes you now work between 5 and 7 on an evening. You share many of the same desired outcomes. Let's see whether this is reflected also in the latter stage. You recognize that while disagreements are natural, they do not need to impede us from taking actions and making decisions together or taking action. And third but not least, even though everything may not be within our control, we share a commitment to act and make decisions towards our shared desired outcomes. Sorry for that last one. What does this mean? This means that you made a promise to each other to help each other also tonight, coming to an agreement. And when there's disagreements, really embrace them as a source of conflict that you're going to use for the good. It means that all of you have a common desire to continue to work on actions for good instead of taking on talking, and having conflict in that. That's a massive shift. And a massive shift, I don't talk about you as a council because I don't know you as a council, but that's bringing leadership to the table. And these are three mirrors that we wanted to bring forward. These are your words from last week. Use them as a mirror now for the decisions you want to bring forward on actions. And in order to help you on that, we conducted the survey, or the staff conducted the survey that you guys filled out, to help you see what are the most important actions, to your opinion, to make this happen. And before I go there, I want to give you the floor. This has been a lot of words. And I feel also on my shoulder that one monkey is now boom, 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 boom. Okay, go on, go on. I want to take one pause to give you the floor, all of you, to ask whether between last week, Tuesday, and today, where does this still resonate? Is there something that you would like to address, or especially address also for today? Did one of you wake up with a nightmare somewhere between Saturday and Sunday because, oh my goodness, I've said that last week, but if this is going to become true, I'm out. This is the space to also reflect that. Or did one of you wake up with an incredible, beautiful dream to say, wow, it's even much more beautiful. I would like to share this with my colleagues. So whatever it is, and certainly also for you two councillors that were not present last week, if there's any questions on what you just heard from my end, please ask them, not to me, but to your colleagues also. So I would like to give you the floor to now ask some questions or bring some additions to the table or some reflections on these also before we continue. So the floor is to the 7 of you. I would like to go onto speakers mode again so that we see your faces. And let's say we can take 10 minutes for this at the max. If we don't need the time, okay. If this is bringing a vivid conversation, we might extend a little bit, but I also want to safeguard our end target for today. So I give the floor to you. What are some more mesmerizing thoughts? What are some reflections? What would you like to add to this? Please go ahead.
Well, I don't mind being first on that. I think that last week's discussion was fruitful. I echo what Ms. Atva said, that this has been a very long month with lots of Metro meetings, TransLink meetings, COVID updates, changes in the tactics on COVID. They all sort of weigh heavy. And then we had that big discussion last week, very forward-looking, collaborative, and I was very encouraged by it. I didn't wake up in a cold sweat or anything this week. I didn't have a great nightmare out of it. But I always keep reminding myself that at the end of the day, with these discussions, our community, we may be having all of these discussions, but it's still a challenge to communicate it out to the community and to make sure that they're aware of what we're contemplating. Now, I think for the most part, the changes in the OCP that we're contemplating are largely de facto a recognition of what we have been doing as a council for the last 2.5 years. Still, we just have to keep remembering that as we move further along, if the community hasn't moved further along, then we've got some work to do with that gap. But I was encouraged by the discussion.
Thank you, Mayor Little.
Councillor Murray, I believe your hand is up.
Thank you. I wasn't at that meeting last week. My apologies. I was unable to attend, so sorry about that. I guess when I look at the slides that were put up, I wish there was a way to share the screen or a way I could see the slides.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I can't help but, and I concur with the comments that Mayor Little made. It's hard because, you know, we're not going out to the community in the way that we would usually go out. And I feel like we've done a lot of talking, staff's done a lot of talking. I was actually thinking, you know, I should just run it by a bunch of my friends to see if they've seen anything in regards to our OCP, or we talk about stakeholders a lot, and I'm not, if those are targeted groups versus just the general population out there. You know, what do they think about all of this? And I guess you know, I can't help but go back to the OCP, the way that it was first created. It was one of the most, you know, the biggest processes that the district had gone through. It was an award-winning process. We put together a document to drive sustainability into the district. And, you know, unfortunately, you know, it wasn't really, it didn't achieve what it laid out to do, in my mind. It impacted a lot of people. It impacted business. It impacted people in affordable housing really negatively. And so I guess I'm a bit jaded in how these plans, we put so much money into them and time, and then we don't follow them. And you know, I don't know how we go forward. It's the will of the council that gets to make these decisions, contrary to what, you know, the essence of the document, the official community plan, had presented to the community, that was supported by the community. So, you know, words are good, but they also need to be respected. And the time and energy that, you know, we spent on that document was massive, only to see affordable housing mowed down, market housing be the priority, you know, light industrial land being rezoned for luxury condos. You know, I've had a lot of people ask me, you know, what has the OCP done for this community, but made it more expensive, less accessible, less diverse, you know, less, I mean, you know, light industrial land is like so scarce, and yet we actively rezoned lots of it. So I'm glad that employment lands was in the slide. That gave me some encouragement, but we gotta actually do what we're saying. And I think that's why the community had it with the last council, because they weren't doing what they said they were gonna do, or what the community collectively wanted them to do. So there you go.
If I could honor some of your words, Councillor Murray, thank you so much for bringing that forward. If also in the voice and the whole tenure for what we bring in now in the workshop is how to bring words to action and action to words and be consistent. That's one of the most challenging leadership skills also as a council, because you can control your plan, but you cannot control reality. And that's a challenge. I also really want to honor a lot on how staff and you as a council have really taken serious all of the preparatory work from the last almost 9 years to not try to reinvent everything, but to compose the things. And I really hope tonight that if you make choices as a council, you could live up to them. But also be cognizant, okay, and where can we control and where is it beyond our control? But let's really continue the conversation on that. So thanks for bringing that in. And Councillor Hansen, I see your hand raised too. So please take the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much. I did enjoy and find the last session worthwhile, and I did find it thought-provoking. I regretted that neither Councillor Murray, Councillor Forbes were in attendance. I'm not criticizing in any way. I'm just saying I would have found the event even more special from my point of view if I'd heard the input of Councillor Murray and Councillor Forbes last week. With that said, and as I reflected on everything that was discussed and everything that stands to be decided, I had three thoughts, and thank you for your way of asking us to, your facilitation of bringing this out. If I woke up in the middle of the night with anxiety, it was with the knowledge of how primary in importance transportation issues are to the people in our community. We talk about a lot of issues and they're all very important, and we have a lot of passion for them, but nothing has changed in that respect. And Councillor Murray and would be sensitive to this, and others of us are as well. Nothing has changed in the sense that if you were to do a poll of North Vancouver district residents and say, what is your biggest concern about our community? It's the inability to get around. I run a business in Lonsdale, and I can tell what the traffic conditions are starting at about 4 in the afternoon because my staff get various degrees of anxiety according to how much congestion there's going to be at certain points as they try to make their way home. That simply is the overarching issue. So I hope we don't forget that's, if we were answering to our community most directly and most literally, it would be to try to address transportation issues. But then at the same time, if I were to wake up in the middle of the night and reflect on this, it was with a renewed conviction that the area where we have greatest control is over land use. That's what we actually control, is zoning and land use. We can't create that third crossing public transit system, light rail that is so needed. That's beyond our immediate control. But what is within our absolute grasp, what we can take responsibility for, is land use. And then I think I also had the strong sense after the last session, and I'd like to put this idea forward, that perhaps the time for a lot of discussion around this is starting to come to an end. Boy, there has been a lot of discussion, it seems to me, and I think I have a pretty good idea of how my council colleagues feel about things, and I do respect my council colleagues and I respect their points of view. At the same time, I think it is time for us to find points of agreement, develop an action plan, and move forward on that action plan in a way that fulfills as best we can our collective sense of priorities, and in addition to that, our obligations to the community. It was a sense that I had after the last session that perhaps more than further discussion, maybe what we need is some consensus. And I thank you for that, Lieven, because there were words you spoke and sentiments you expressed that somehow gave me the idea that we could put aside our differences, find our areas of agreement, and take whatever steps we actually can practically for the benefit of those who elected us. So those would be my comments.
Are there any more additions or reflections, or could we move over to the ta-da, what would be the actions you chose together? And also referring to what you just said, Councillor Hansen, is this then, could we agree on something in order to create space for the next stage? That's in fact the last words I heard you voice. That's absolutely also the goal of tonight. So, yeah. Councillor Forbes, is there anything you want to say to add to the table before we continue?
Thank you. I was at the meeting last week for about, I think, a half an hour or 45 minutes, and then I lost the connection, so I apologize for that. I guess one of the things that I would like to add, a lot of the things that were already said, I'm in agreement with, not all of them. But when we've all been elected for some reason, and we may not all have been elected for the same reason. So I think that's where the differences may come in and show between us. And there has to be a way for all of us to either agree to disagree or agree to listen. Because sometimes you can get entrenched in your own ideas and not really listen. And that's one of the things that I hope in 2030 that the community will say, is that we were a council that listened. The people may not get everything that they had hoped to because of things out of our control. But I hope that that's one thing they'll say, that we did listen. We listened and we tried. I was on the implementation committee for a year, reviewing how the OCP was being implemented, and it wasn't. And as Councillor Murray says, most of the things that were in the OCP were wonderful, sounded great, but when one of the reasons I ran for election was because it wasn't being implemented. It was just talk. There wasn't any action behind it. And that is what the community got frustrated about. So I guess the other word I would use is I would hope the community would say that this council was supportive of the OCP, and we did support trying to achieve those goals. And that would be the second thing that I would hope that we could be proud of in 2030. Thank you.
Could I just add one more thing?
Absolutely.
I think one of the frustrations from the community, throughout the OCP was that it sounded really good and they were very supportive of protecting the environment, wanting to create diversity of housing close to the bridgeheads. So, the transportation network could support the increase in population. They wanted to make sure that the social values and the fabric of the community were protected. They wanted to be able to have jobs that were within the municipality that could support our community. And they wanted to make sure, they've always said this, they've said this for decades, they've said, make sure the infrastructure is there to support, the population, because we're kind of on an island. We've got, two ways on and off, and they're both kind of clogged ways generally. And we don't have enough sea buses, and we're tiny, although we think we're really, really big. For years we've been compared to, New York and Singapore and Hong Kong, but we're just little tiny North Vancouver. We're the little guys in the game. And so I just think that people this community's always been open to a level of change. It's just the amount of change that has occurred in the last 10 years has been astronomical. Like astronomical. And it affected them so deeply. Councillor Hanson points out, like, people were taking 2 hours to get across the North Shore because they were stuck in traffic gridlock and infrastructure projects that were massive, plus having a major highway, running through our community directly to the best ski resort in North America. Like, and then the highway access to the ferries to Vancouver Island. So I just think that, I hear this word action, and I'm going to have a nightmare tonight and some anxiety. I'm having it right now, and maybe that's why I'm the color I am. I've really got to figure out the lighting in my office. But we've had so much action, like that was part of the problem. There was just way too much going on. It was time to sort of play catch up. And, there's projects going on all across the North Shore, all across the region that are absolutely huge that are multi-year projects. And it's just been a lot for people to take. They're driving through a construction project every time, like 10 of them, you know, not just one, but 10. And that's just on our side. And then you cross the bridge. So, you know, I think this council was elected because we said we were just going to slow down. We were going to catch up. We were going to chill out. We had done a lot, you know, and we're certainly, we've done a full 180 in regards to the kind of housing that we're looking at. But, you know, the development community and the market is still coming at us. And I just, that's the part that I wish we could just figure out, because it just kind of feels like we're going back to that place that we were. And I don't think we've caught up yet.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes and Councillor Murray. These are great additions and very profound reflections. And you know, an action plan is a means to an end. And an OCP is a means to an end. From the moment leadership steps up to make it happen, it becomes the real instrument. And what I hear you say, and that's one thing. Second, also what you started with, Councillor Murray, there's one great expression that once was said to me when I was starting another big venture is, if the gods want to punish you, they make your dream happen. And the danger of the best possible OCP process ever is that you create such a mountain of expectations of the best possible outcome that in order to live up to that, you create such a tension for you as a council, even the previous council and you, that bridging that gap is almost being punished by the gods for making your dream happen, because that's a long run to make. The beauty of the results that I'm going to show to you is real leadership only starts, implementation starts when, and it was said very beautifully, when the walk and the talk come together. In implementation, then people see things change. Then you see effects come in. And the closer this feedback loop is, or the smaller this feedback loop is, the better. Which does not mean that you have to exclude 30 years on dreams and ambitions in the future. But if you talk too much about these and people don't see a change in the upcoming months that is linked and related to that, in the end, you're not trustworthy. And it's very interesting for me to see, while I've been asked also to facilitate you into the action planning, what we have now in the second time is we are talking leadership constantly. You guys are talking values, principles, and how to agree with one another and how to help each other put the disagreements aside and form one collective body of change. And by having this conversation, you are. So having things in your hands, so our invitation, it's also, there's an implicit decision-making framework that we present here too. And that is, start with the most important things that all of you can remember by heart. And if you can keep on remembering these 7 or 9 most important ones, then you can add more to the table, but give that the time. So if it's okay, with your permission, I would like to bring you to the survey results and to see whether these actions are really a fit for purpose. And important also, adding to what Councillor Murray and Councillor Forbes just said, these actions, it might be a relief, hopefully, that they are maybe not new, but they might be a reaffirmation of what you know. But the invitation will be, how will you accelerate the implementation of this? And this is also what Councillor Forbes just said so beautifully. Implementation is what people want to see. So we have that one sheet that you have to remember by heart as soon as you can. It's going to come up right now. That's the executive summary of everything. This is the way you think. It's a mirror because it's your actions, it's your reflections. This is the mirror of what you would like to see as big, bold actions on high agreement and importance. Could I have the next sheet, please, or slides? Where do you have a high agreement on important actions? And this was also the request last week. What are these big actions, the bold actions you could take? And although they might not sound surprising with the feedback you just gave and also last week, if you stick to this and you can build an action plan around this to materialize them every 3 months, you're on the track. So regarding transportation, what you all saw as the most important one with a high agreement is complete the walking and cycling connections. This is the most important bold action for all of you. On housing, there's the incentivizing of the social and supportive housing projects, as also just mentioned by Councillor Murray. On economy and employment lands, it's get our key transportation networks moving better. It's an economical one, completely linked to the transportation part. And then advocate for provincial assessment review and tax reform. And on the climate emergency, it's achieve the low carbon compact and complete town and village centers. This is our goal where we have to focus on, and create and apply a climate equity lens to district decision making. These are the bold actions that you are in high agreement on to take forward. It also means, and I would like to invite you from the level of decision making and leadership, if you as council could focus on the narrative and the storytelling on how every month there's a change happening somewhere on these, and also explain why it might go slow sometimes, why there's so many actions happening at the same time, and also the world changes, but that you can demonstrate dedication on moving the needle on these, that's what you would like to choose for. This would be the core and the backbone for your action planning that we need to refine, and that staff together with you will refine in the upcoming months. There's one very important fundament underneath. There's also a very high agreement on an important action on the social equity thing. Strive for a more inclusive and equitable community is a baseline for every one of you. So it's really important to address that. That's the baseline for all of the colors above: transportation, housing, economy, employment, and climate emergency. The social equity lens is really a very important one that is carrying everything to the next level. So my invitation to you, what do you need? And can you all say yes to these points? As this is our backbone. These are the actions we are in agreement on to build our action plan around. That will be the question afterwards. But this is not coming just out of the air in simplicity. This is underbuilt with a lot of data. This is really honoring the whole OCP process of the past, the surveys that we did in the last half year, that staff did in the last half year due to COVID and other things. So I want to break it down in a little more detail and take care that right monkey will move again, because it's a lot of information, but it's to help you see the whole picture on where does this come from and what is more at the table that you could choose from in the next stage. So Nicole, could I have the next slide, please? On transportation, yeah, hello?
This is Dave Stewart. I just want to add maybe a comment and a question I think that's pretty relevant to this.
Thank you.
I think we went into this OCP, when we created the OCP, with a naive understanding of how much we could actually control as opposed to how much we aspired to. And so I think it's really important as we move to identifying changes, redirections, refinements to that OCP, we also ask ourselves, so that we're not naive again, about the extent to which we can actually control this, whether the market's going to control it, the economy's going to control it, the government's senior levels of government can control it. I think we need to understand that and have a discussion about it before we settle on actions. And I think I understand where Councillor Murray's coming from. I don't want to end up steading on along the same path, identifying actions which we cannot control or we cannot in fact implement. So we have a wonderful aspirational document, but it's not going to achieve what we need to achieve. So I just, I thought of this as, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do we think, how much control do we have to actually achieve this? And there's two parts of it. One is the implementation of it, and the other part is an advocacy role. And I think we need to be very clear where we can only be advocates as opposed to implementers. So I think that's an important lens to look at as we talk to this. Otherwise, we might end up in the same space we did with the OCP and being unhappy with it because we are being naive about what we actually can implement and are in control of implementation. I just wanted to throw that out for consideration.
Thank you so much, Mr. Stewart, for this very valuable piece to the table. Yeah.
I think a really good example of what, you know, when Mr. Stewart talks about the control, you know, so many things are out of our control, and yet land use is one of the things that is absolutely in our control. But the value of the land and the assessment of that land and highest and best use screwed that up so badly. It's why we've landed where we've landed in many cases. So even with the things that are, you know, what we do as a municipality, what our greatest powers are, we still didn't even have control over that because of the cost of the land and what that presented in regards to applications coming forward. And you know, what was said then and what we're doing now is also you know, a bit of a hypocrisy as well. And so yeah, anyway, I just wanted to add that control.
Yeah, I would like to absolutely take the part of control and not control in at the later stage of this conversation, because implementation is, as Mr. Stewart said, is also taking in your hands what you can take in your hands. But let's bring that to a next level also at the end of this presentation and also in your conversation together. So, and maybe that's also very well, when you look to, what I would like to do now is go through the 4 building blocks, the 4 needs, and just also mirror for yourselves what were, in more detail, what were your answers and what is the material you can work with, also in order to let the action plan then emerge further. And so, Nicole, if you could bring the next slide, please. Transportation has been built up. So the star one is the one that is really, that has been chosen by you, all of you, as the most important of big impact actions, but it's not the only action. There were 4 very important big impact actions formulated by you. That's also advocate for the district's transportation priorities, which is an advocacy also for things that are beyond the full control of the district. Make transit faster and more reliable on our major routes, and support remote work options. These were the 4 big impact actions. So that's not only one, but our invitation is to make it simple and bold from the beginning, to then start opening it up again. There's also quite a lot of supporting actions that came with that you scored. And we highlighted 5 of them that you see here at the right-hand side. It's review the parking requirements for new developments, adopt the Vision Zero approach to travel safety, optimize use of curbside space, harness emerging technology for new ways of moving around, and educate to encourage walking, biking, and taking transit. And what does this give? It's giving you ways to move around. Where do we have impact to accelerate implementation, knowing that our most important big impact action is completing the walking and cycling connection. All the things you could add from these supporting actions to that is a win, is a plus. What we also brought into the mapping is what needs to be added to that. And that's 4 points for every bucket. Create and apply an accessibility equity lens to district decision-making. Support greater mobility options for district residents. Make safe, accessible routes to schools and other community amenities a priority. And advocate for rapid transit routes from the district to adjacent municipalities. Too many words to read, so my apologies for that. But this is your map. So for every need, there's a lot of different things, but there's also there's connections. There's a priority in importance and then going to the little things. So you chose the star. How to get to the star, there's supportive actions doing that. So that's for transportation. The next one to go to housing is, there's one most important one, the incentivizing of the social and supportive housing projects. And you have that in your hands. So thank you also to see the balance. What can we control? What can we not control? There are 2 major other ones. Continue to focus growth in town and village centers. And the 3rd one, explore opportunities to increase housing diversity beyond the town and village centers. So these are 2 other big impact actions that you brought forward as important. Supporting actions over there, it's advocacy for the district's social and supportive housing needs, support and protect renters through policy and zoning, simplify and speed up housing approvals, bolster the district's capacity to achieve housing goals, continue to monitor and track housing data, explore alternate housing tenures and needs. I read it fast so that you know there's a lot to the table that we can use, that can be used also in the next stage, but how can this all contribute to you making an impact on implementation? What needs to be added to housing? It's incentivizing and expedite passive zero fossil fuel projects and infill developments, promote social connectivity with residential developments, make deconstruction of buildings a requirement, emphasize that housing is an essential need, not a commodity, advocate for a diversity of unit sizes. So again, a lot to the table, but if you don't want to drown and you want to have a simple message to the municipality, how to keep on focusing on the big impact action, the star, and use the other ones as a support. Next one, I go fast through this, economy and employment lands, 2 big impact actions, get our key transportation networks moving better. Second, advocate for provincial assessment review and tax reform. These 2 were complemented by you by create an economy and employment planning staff liaison resource and increase housing diversity and supply to support employees. Again, a crossover with housing. Supporting actions there's a lot. Review zoning bylaw to support business resiliency, respond to local business needs more quickly, protect industrial employment uses for encroachments, incentivize employment generating development, support the regional industrial lands strategy for a resilient economic region, boost support to meet needs of local employees, and prepare an employment land strategy. What to add? Again, a mouthful of topics: monitor and track employment data, monitor and track industrial land supply and demand, facilitate small local businesses and new commercial and mixed-use developments, explore opportunities to introduce neighborhood commercial uses within residentials, advocate for regulatory controls on large-scale pollution activities, and support the creation of business improvement areas in the district. Almost at the end, so I want to feed the monkey on data and knowledge. Last bucket and last need, climate emergency. The most important one was achieve these low carbon, compact and complete town and village centers, which could be amazing. Supported by 3 other ones: strengthen resiliency of built and natural assets. My apologies. Reduce greenhouse gas emissions in buildings and daily choices, and strive for a zero carbon mobility system. Again, a huge amount of supporting actions. Oh no, it's far less. Sorry, I was looking to the wrong one. Important, create and apply a climate equity lens to district decision making. This one has also become a big impact action because in our requests also in the survey, we asked what are now the most important ones, and this one came back again. So that's why it also got a star. Promote hybrid and remote work opportunities and encourage also climate action in homes and businesses. What to add? Promote regional food security initiatives, continue to assess the district's natural assets, explore policies to promote urban biodiversity, minimize habitat fragmentation, make deconstruction of buildings a requirement, advocate for removal of pesticide use, and continue to educate the public about greenhouse gas emissions and our ecological footprints. And here we go back to the first one. This is where I feel that I'm out of breath, bringing all of this to you. And why it's also, this is the tension you now have with the action plan. That's the tension you have with the OCP, is how to make a stand, how to be seen as people that implement and not talk. And how, from the moment you start embracing everything that is on the table, you keep on talking. Like I just did, I did for 10 minutes and I only scratched the surface. So my invitation to all of you, what do you need to get stuck to this and repeat the story of this one slide, that if you repeat this and you use this as a footprint, and all of the rest needs to lead to that, you create what we call an agile strategy. You create an agile action plan. And you already indicated two important parameters. The way you can use this related to all of the words I just used is in two ways. Focus on what you control and try to get rid of what you cannot control or not be dependent on what you not control. Second, how to focus on implementation, implementation, implementation from now on. And these are two working principles that can guide you as council to make this happen. So the big invitation is not to talk further about all of the details, but use the incredible team of staff, of citizens, of engagement to see how you can bring this to life every month over and over again and take short-term actions and decisions in order to bring this alive. And that's where we are at. And so our question for discussion, and we are mid-time, so that's perfect timing. The rest of the time is yours. And eventually, if I have to continue till midnight, I'm yours. But my desire is for you as a council, how can you make a choice now? Close up, say, this is our choice. We can live with these 7 or 9 choices we just made. And all we're gonna do is have all of our conversations gonna contribute to make this being implemented within our control. And so, opening up for conversation and discussion is, having seen all of these actions, I showed you the pitfall of the huge amount of actions that could be used. I showed you the cherries on the cherries on the cake. That's the summary. My question to all of you: if you stick to these 9 ones, do these actions help you to get to the desired outcomes? And here I would like to open the floor again to all of you, and I would like to hear your voices and give each of you, let's say, 2 to 3 minutes of speech time to just voice your opinion. Do these actions help you to get to the desired outcomes? And in fact, this question that we prepared already got a different flavor due to you. The desired outcome that you phrased is implementation, seeing results on these things. That's the desired outcome you said. And taking the wheel in your hands on what you control and not being deviated from what you cannot control. So then I repeat this question at another level. Do these actions then help you to create the desired outcomes? In other words, are they implementable? And can you control them enough to make a change happen? And the floor is yours. And I can imagine that you need to see, that's one slide, the summary slide, once again, before we open up and see the faces again. So here it is. And if you read this, if you focus on these things, are they implementable enough? And can you control them enough to make a difference for your community in the upcoming 2 to 10 years? And the floor is yours again. So whoever wants to speak first, or maybe Mayor Little, if you want to kick off. And if you're still reflecting, you can also say, I want to kick off by just delegating to my next colleague. It's completely free. So I open the space for you as a team. Are you still there? Nicole, can you put off screen sharing, please?
Can I just make a comment that what Mr. Stewart said is so important, even when we're looking at what you put together for us? Because you can have some people who believe, well, this isn't in our wheel well, and we only have so much energy or so much time, or we're trying to get things done fast. So let's deal with the things that we do control, and we'll leave it to the other things to fall into place before we put our attention towards those things. That's not quite the way I wanted to say it. But then there's another group that may think that, well, it's not things aren't happening fast enough. For instance, things that the province, other governments are downloading to us. So on top of what we're already trying to do, we're getting more stuff that we're expected to do from one side. And then we have our community who wants us to do the things that they're saying as well. So I guess what I'm trying to say is some people, there's that line between advocacy and what's within our control is really sometimes very, very hard to define how much time as a council we can spend on advocacy and we can spend on dealing with what we can control. Because sometimes you want to push the provincial government, hoping that they'll come back and allow us to do some things. And sometimes you just, you know, it's going to take 5 years before they even think about it. So maybe we should concentrate our efforts on the things we've already defined that are within our control. So I just think what Mr. Stewart said is exceptionally important to bear in mind with every task that we may look at to achieve something. Is it within our control? And how much time do we give it if it's advocacy? That's all.
I see some hands raised, so Councillor Hansen, Councillor Bond, feel free to come in.
Thank you very much. And I mean, focusing on that question, do the actions help us to get to the desired outcomes? I would say yes, with respect to the bullets that we just saw there. My concern is the phrase, get our key transportation networks moving better. I would like a little bit more clarification. Again, given the critical importance of transportation to the people who elected us, what exactly do we mean by that? Is it within our control? I think it is partially, but what actually are the action steps? I mean, I contrast that to completing the cycling and the active transportation networks. I mean, that's tangible. And I would suggest, by the way, we really should elevate that as a significant priority because that's something we can achieve tangibly. But going on further to get our key transportation networks moving again, I'd like to know a little bit more about what those action steps are.
Is there any way you can share those slides? Because I don't have those in front of me. I don't know if I missed them from last week.
The presentation has been, because of the survey, has all been conducted in the last 2 days. So I'm not sure whether they are in your mailbox, Councillor Forbes and other councillors and Mayor Little. So Nicole, do you know, or Tina?
What we'll be doing after today is also, or at the end of today, probably tomorrow morning, is putting up all the information on the website as well. So that will again show the summary information. The feedback form closed, I guess it was actually Friday morning. So we can certainly also pull that back together so you could see that in a fulsome way if you didn't have a chance to look at it. But we don't, it's not a live, that part of the survey, if you will, is not live anymore.
No, but what you've presented to us tonight.
Yeah, just those slides, the four,
Yeah.
the five, where are they?
Thank you. Absolutely. The slides, all of the slides will be up on the website tomorrow.
Well, it's hard to talk to the things that we've seen tonight when we don't have it in front of us.
There you go.
Thank
That's
you.
what we want.
Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you also, Councillor Hansen, Councillor Bond, you had your hands raised. So can I give you the floor? Oh, you just have a visitor. Or if somebody else first wants to take the floor while we see this intimate moment in front of us, is also perfect. So thanks for sharing that also, Councillor Bond.
I'll try. Oh, yeah. Last time we were on Zoom, we had the lipstick. And so it's, I don't know, she wants to see the green lips on Zoom today. So
Yellow.
Yellow. Okay. So in thoughts about the question that you're asking right now, Levin, is when I look at this list, I think a lot of the things, all of them move us towards the outcomes that we want. And when we think about the question of which ones are in our control, we've got to be able to see the people on the TV, okay? The transportation one, completing the walking and cycling connections, I think that's 100% within our control. We can do that. It's we own the infrastructure, and so that's something that's within our control. And on the climate emergency, applying a climate equity lens to decision making, again, that's our own decision making process. We control that. Now, on most of the other ones, on the housing front, we can kind of, I think, and on the town centers, we can kind of create some of the conditions necessary. We would have to take necessary steps in order to create conditions for those actions to happen, but they are reliant on others, right? I think in the social housing, it's either higher levels of government or nonprofits that we rely on. And in the town centers, it would mostly be the private market and the development industry in order to build homes in the town centers. So, and some of it, Councillor Hanson, I think on getting transportation networks moving. Again, what does that mean? Does it mean moving more cars? Does it mean moving more people? And what does that mean? What exactly does that mean? How can we control that? So that's, I guess, my first few thoughts about that.
Thank you. So what you say, Councillor Bon, in fact, there's quite enough species that we have in our control, and how can we explore also as council to go deeper into that and see where we can even take more control in order to focus on the right actions to take out of this. Is that correct? Who has some more reflections on this? So I repeat the question also that came with this. Do these actions help you to get to the desired outcomes? And also, do these actions help you to address the key issues? That's the second question coming with it. So that's where we would like to weave around. And it's very interesting what's coming up so far already.
So, you have to be able to measure decision making. And I think at the beginning, Councillor Forbes was talking about implementation, and you said implementation is what people want to see. I think actually it was, are we going to implement what we said we were going to do, or are we going to implement something else? And I think the past showed that we implemented something else. We didn't implement the document the way that it was prescribed. And, I say that knowing that the document is a living, malleable piece of work, and it is subject to change. The OCP is a means to an end, but an OCP just goes on forever and ever and ever, because communities, evolve. They speed up, they slow down, they change, they evolve. Economies rise and fall. It's all about different levels of change. So, of course, complete walking and cycling connections. But I guess you would have to ask yourself, and I was supportive of this, that it was one of the things I was supportive of, but you have to ask yourself, those walking and cycling connections are achieving what? What are we trying to achieve by those walking and cycling connections? Because you can build walking and cycling connections for the perspective of recreational cycling and going for a stroll around your block, depending on how you want to do that, or in your community, or you can use them as commuter cycling connections. Are we going to prioritize that part of our transportation connections to make sure that we have areas that are connected so we can move more people, so they have an alternative to the car and to public transportation? Because we don't get the dollars that other municipalities get, because we don't have the density, we don't need to service those kinds of areas. We just don't get that funding. So I don't know. I don't know if this is going to get us where we need to be. It depends on where these connections are, and what kind of cycling and walking connections we're building for what purpose. Of course, we want our communities to be as connected as possible, but we also have some geographical challenges like weather and hills. And that, you know, that changes the outcome of walking and cycling in different months of the year. So we have to be able to measure it to make sure that we're putting those dollars and putting that energy into areas that are going to get the highest use to result in the best outcome, which is getting people into another form of transportation. You know, e-bikes has changed that certainly a bit because of, you know, what they provide for people. But, you know, we have so many dollars every year. We have to prioritize where that money goes. We can't do all the connections at once. The past, we have relied on development doing it. I don't know if that's been the best way. I wish that we had front-ended it a little bit. So I think there's a lot. You said not to talk about the details. I can't help it. You know, there has to be a measured way of assessing.
Yeah, thank you. Well, this Councillor Beck.
Thank you. Thanks, Levin. Yeah, so just looking at these actions, complete walking and cycling connections to me, as has already been said, I think makes sense largely just because it's so much in our control. In terms of the action under economy and employment lands, I wanted to comment on the advocacy around the provincial assessment highest and best use issue. I think it's obviously an important issue to our business community, but I think because it is strictly advocacy, that it really isn't under our control. My preference was sort of the larger action around a staff liaison resource around economy and employment planning that I thought would have spoken to more of the small business issues and would have become this resource really within our organization for the small business community. I just feel like that particular action is quite a specific issue, and it's again largely not under our control. So I think advocacy is extremely important in a lot of these issues, and I think we are already doing that work, but I just thought as one of our big actions, it's too specific in my mind. But I think the rest of the actions I do support. Getting our transportation networks moving again. I mean, that's largely advocacy as well, I suppose. It's working through the recommendations of the InStep report. And a lot of those we can implement. So yeah, I'm in support of all those other options. That was just the one that jumped out to me as being kind of a specific issue that we aren't necessarily in control of.
Yeah. Thank you. Any more voices that you want to bring up? Somebody wants to add?
Excuse me, Levin, if I could jump in just for a sec. I appreciated that context Councillor Back gave on getting our key transportation networks moving again. And I apologize for the late input. I couldn't hear as well for a few seconds there, but that's exactly what we've been saying in the companion document about the transportation networks. What are those actions that the coordinated, transportation planning that InStep was suggested? And some of those are bigger things like the Burrard Inlet Rapid Transit Crossing or upper levels corridor study, changes at the bridgehead, but also, we know that the link here with where it's stated here and under economy, get our transportation networks moving, lots of bus pieces there too, whether or not that's our rapid bus that we've got now. Yes, these take partnerships in most cases, getting the bus across to Metrotown, but also then linking back to the transportation bullet point around walking and cycling, like many different elements there. And I also appreciate the comment around the details, because I also naturally want to get into the details and look at what have we done, what is left to be done, which one of those connections are we looking at changing? Some of those, is something missing? Are we talking about the connections between key destinations or our centers or something else. And I guess what I would just add here is that those details, or the tactics, if you will need to be part of our thinking and our action plan. At this point, I think there is some merit and value to looking at the larger strategic framework, if you will. But I completely acknowledge and agree that each of these means so much. And yes, many of them we have been doing, we are doing. Is that enough? Do we need to reshift some of these, reprioritize some of the tactics or the pieces within these larger buckets? But thank you for raising those questions and those points.
Levin, I was just going to ask on the housing topic. We've just got the one action, obviously a very important one around social and supportive housing. But can we have another action? Like, are we aiming to narrow it down to one in each category, or what is our target there?
No, it's and where does your question come from, Councillor Beck? Is this because you think there's more to the table than this if you want to move the needle? Is that what you want to say?
Well, maybe there's just some of the other more supporting actions that I thought would have been included, and I'm not sure that they would fall under that particular big action.
Yep. If you, Nicole, could you go to slide 12, please? So, Councillor Beck, it's important that, and I really want to stress out, it's not because we want to invite you in choosing the real map, the real North Star on these 7 to 8, and it's already very valuable feedback on refining that. There's much more to the table. So also there's a map now that you have, all of you, to say, okay, but if we need a little bit more of this, what could we add? So this is the map also of housing. The executive summary, if you want, of housing is this one. So it means that there are some more to the table. So there's in fact 3 that has been chosen by you as the most important big impact actions. And that's the 2 other ones. If I just read them out loud again, it's continue to focus growth in the town and village centers as a second engine for change on housing. And the 3rd one is explore opportunities to increase housing diversity beyond the town and village centers. So these are 2 engines for change too. But there's a bucket full of supporting actions. So the invitation we have is really, please let you play with this. So, and maybe it's too short of a time frame tonight to completely carve it in stone, but we could change that. You could add. But I think more important to the conversation is what you did this night already is quite transformative. In fact, what you're saying implicitly as a council is, you know, Levin, we can have these actions, but more importantly is that we can choose them, but there's 2 very important criteria for choosing them. As long as they're implementable and as long as we have control on them, we can work with them. And all of these actions, if they are not implementable and they are too far beyond your control, they make no sense now, because you want to make an impact and you want to see the change happen. So this is very strong. In fact, what you are saying as a council is, yes, let's agree on this. And that's not my assumption. I really want to hear, I want to test my assumption. My assumption is the following. You are saying now as a council, that's my storytelling. And it's you can challenge me, but my storytelling on what I hear you say is we are up to say yes to all of these things as long as they are implementable and we can take the wheel in our hands to achieve this. And the 3rd one has been added by Councillor Murray. And as long as they do what we want them to do, and that's your vision, mission, and the ambition, that's the previous slides, the first slides of last week. As long as they are, an answer to that, then we can move on. And so it means that you need an instrument in your hands to steer, to navigate with this, and it needs to be controllable and it needs to be implementable. And that's what I hear you say. And if these are the criteria, these are criteria for the kind of action plan you want. So this is quite important. Given these criteria, you're going to create a different action plan than a static action plan that's going to be a rollout for the next 5 years. Because then you might miss out on control and you might miss out on implementation. So that's my storytelling of what I hear you say. Going back to slide 15.
Levin, it's Dave Stewart. I just want to follow up on that comment. I don't think we should be abandoning things that we don't completely have control over. I just think we have to be very clear, both with ourselves as an organization and the community, so that we don't create expectations that we can't deliver on. I hate to quote Rudy Giuliano, but I will. I would much rather, under promise and over deliver than over promise and under deliver. And I think that's the nexus of our problem right now. And if we're going to be going out to the community and supporting these, I would hate to see aspirational or advocacy be lost in the discussion, because it's very important. And sometimes through partnerships, that's the only way we can achieve things. But at the same time, I think we have to be honest with the community and honest with ourselves, so that what we're saying is we will strive to do this. We will do everything we can to do this, but realize that we may not be able to achieve it because it's out of our control.
Mayor Little, thank you so much, Mr. Stewart. Mayor Little, your hand is raised. So,
yeah, I guess if we can go back to 15, slide 15, that might help me with sorting out my thoughts on this. Yeah, so, I understand that people have the impression that transportation, complete walking and cycling networks is entirely within our control. The biggest problem areas are our interchanges with the highways. And we have to do that work with the provincial government. And then the other areas that are still an ongoing major problem are areas where we're trying to bring increased bus service through. And so we have to work with TransLink on those areas to be able to have both bus service and bike service through. They're always going to be partnered up on those projects as well. That doesn't mean that it can't still be our goal in areas that we need to work in. In fact, what I like about this process is, that for us, I mean, obviously we're talking about a 10-year horizon for the planning process, but we've got about a year and a half left on this council. And so what things can we focus on for the remainder of our time on council that have a high likelihood of being supported broadly by the council, and let's put our time and effort in there. And if there are issues that there's significant splits and differences, maybe we don't prioritize them as much. And so I've been fine with that. I wanted to comment on Councillor Back raised the issue of a business consultant as a specific action. I'd encourage you to talk to Mr. Stewart about that. We have had business consultants in the past, and after a year and a half or 2 years with them, we walked away from them. It worked well as an initial energy, and then we with Lucy's time, and then with Martin Cruz for a time, and then each time we took a break from it and went away because they were actually taking a tremendous amount of resources and time and not necessarily producing the kinds of results we're looking for. But Mr. Stewart can talk to you more about that one. On the housing piece, I think this is a very defensible goal, in particular because we had a referendum question on this issue. And so in the last election, there was a referendum that was passed by our community to heavily invest in and participate in creating social and affordable housing in our community. And so we can always be pointing back to that and saying, look, we're listening to exactly what was said during the last election on that matter. On the issue of climate emergency, I always have a little bit of an issue with this word complete, because your definition of complete, my definition of complete, they're always going to be different. There is no complete. Yes, you could have the core services necessary, but what we're already seeing in Larco is that, and Lower Capilano is that there's developments lined up for all of the fringe area as well. And so even though we may have sold the community on advancing and completing the project, and if we do it all at once, then you're going to get a rest afterwards. There's no rest for the weary. There's projects all the way around that have been proposed as well. And so we're going to have to create the breaks. We're going to have to create an opportunity for the community to get a bit of a break, because if we leave it to the market, you will never have a break in that community. It will never be viewed as a complete community in terms of market demand. So I just wanted to just comment on a few of the different things there, Levin. But like I said, I think that what's effective about this is it gives us a focus for the remainder of our term on areas of high levels of agreement. So I'm supportive.
Can I just add to the comments that Mayor Little made in regards to the idea of what complete is? you know, so many of these, especially in the town centers, the developments, the build outs are so long on them. You know, they're like 5-6 years, depending on when they start. We really don't know how those communities are going to operate. And, you know, Lower Capilano is a good example. I think there was this vision that what was being built down there, and the community center hasn't gone in. But it really, you know, I think the community center is really going to be the only game in town on that west side of Capilano Road. You know, the concept of this sort of hustle and bustle in that area really hasn't, it doesn't even seem to be, there doesn't seem to be an ability even to realize it if we wanted to, because of, you know, the details, again, the space allocation for small business, the uses within the area, the size of the units, you know, those all play into what the end game is. And those things have been largely not looked at and not considered. You know, we hope the market is going to bring that to us, but they don't necessarily do that. You know, their game may be just to lease out a space to the highest bidder within a list of, you know, 100 uses. And that might not create the vision that we have for a complete community. And so all of those little details, they're super important to how the end game is complete. We may idealize a town center as, you know, having a butcher, a baker, and a candlestick maker, but whether they actually are realized is another story. And I think we also felt when we were looking at these town centers that there would be this, you know, great opportunity for, you know, families and a very eclectic mix of different levels of financial disposition. And, you know, we don't know that that's going to actually materialize. Certainly in the Capilano, you know, those units are so expensive that you just, you know, you're making a major income to go in there, and you may not be, you know, raising a family in those units. So we haven't really seen any build out in any of our town centers, and so it's hard to measure anything and understand if what we've created is actually what we're going to end up with.
I would like to ask you a next question. It's very interesting, Councillor Murray, on what you bring up, but it's a reflection on how our brains work. And I don't know you, but the typical dynamic in teams, especially when people want to really achieve something, and you councillors are mostly people that are social leaders. They choose for a social cause, for a cause for good. And to be honest, these are sometimes the most difficult ones. Why? Because you are really doing this for a cause, because you believe in something. So you have to have a kind of stubbornness, and also in order to achieve the goals that you believe in and that you were chosen for. So also going back to what Councillor Forbes said, it's time to agree now and to bring things to note. That's what Councillor Hansen said. How can we agree on the things in order to implement what we all believe in? And agreement and disagreement, and it's there, we are chosen for different reasons, but you're all chosen for the same reason too. That's to bring the future of the community closer to the reality today. That's where you're chosen for as a collective. And the danger of social leaders, and with social I mean leaders for the community, is that we are hijacked by our brains by always looking to what we didn't do yet, instead of looking to what we accomplished. And we have a simple math in our brains. So what works with our neurobrains is that for one negative thing that happens in your community, you need 3 positive ones to complement that. And that's also how it works towards people. If you give 1 negative feedback to somebody, it needs 3 to 4 to 5 compliments to that other person in order to be in balance. And the best test is try it out with your wife or your husband tonight. And you can either choose to start with the 5 good ones or the bad ones first, but you're gonna have the test to the table. And when this is always aggravated in a group. So what it requires in order for you to see the positiveness of your implementation is to train your collective muscle every month again. What did we achieve this month? Because you're going to need 5 good achievements to back up for one negative thing that happened in the community again. And what is difficult? People are much more used to complain and give a negative feedback than they are used to give a compliment. And that's also something that's also a management principle for you as a team. How could you also oblige yourselves as a team to communicate the realizations you made as a group? Because this is going to strengthen your muscle, which will not say that you cannot look at, wow, we desperately fail on this and this and this. But that's a challenge. That's not a personal failure. That's not a council failure. That's something to manage. And I just want to bring it in as a reflection. To go to a next stage, and that's to ask we still have half an hour to go, so that's not that long. Well, I think I'm having a bit of a problem, and a positive one. We had a goal in mind for tonight, together with you. The goal was, can you as a team agree on the most important actions to bring this forward? So what happened also in this conversation, that's also what I said already, you brought much more to the table. What you brought to the table is, Lieven, if we agree on things, it needs to go together with some leadership conditions to bring them into place. So we've seen this slide now for a while. I would like to bring up, Nicole, could you go to the next slide, please? And could you bring the 3 questions at once? These were the questions we had in mind to help you come to a closure in the OCP as a kind of tipping point. To say, this is our backbone from actions, the ones you just saw. We got some reflections, some recommendations on refinement, some questions for explanation. That's what happened in the last half an hour. The question I already raised is, do these actions help you get to the desired outcomes? Do the actions help you address the key issues? And a question I didn't raise yet, but it's an important one, it's the crucial one. Are you ready to engage the community on these working action lists? That's the question we held as the most important one, to hear from all of you, yay, that's where we're going to go for. These actions, but you brought much more to the table, which is very rich. You brought to the table, we can say yes to actions as long as they answer to the criteria I already described. That's much more than that we are aiming for now. It's already going to implementation. But I'm going to repeat this question. Are you, each individually, ready to engage the community on this working action list? Why this question? The next stage is not that this needs to be a carved in stone thing, but the next stage is that there's still an engagement process with your community. The question is, how do you want to engage community into this without making false promises? And the referral to Mr. Giuliano, it's better to over-deliver and under-promise. That's also very important though in the engagement process. What I learned is, how will you not evoke or awaken expectations that you cannot manage? I think that's a very important message from tonight. And before we go there, I would like to hear from each of you separately. One question, 2 things is, are you ready with your colleagues to engage the community on this working action list? And what are then for you the conditions that need to be in place to do that? That's the 2 questions I want to bring to the table. And that's what I would like to hear from each of you individually. And when I look at the time, we still got 2 to 3 minutes each to complement that. But then we can also go to a kind of conclusion. So can you push the button with this slide of the high agreement, high important actions? Can you push the button on yes? These can be the backbones with the necessary refinements under these conditions. What are your conditions to say yes to this? And you have 2 minutes, then we are left with, or 3-4 minutes if you have a little more time to expand tonight, so that we really are clear on this is what we're going to go for. Feel free to start, whoever is ready.
Lieven.
Also feel free to say no because of this and this and this. Yes, Dan, I hear you speaking.
Just wanted to pop in one little caveat. This question about ready to engage the community is not about tactics of engagement. This is about the content, what you want to bring to the table, what you want to share with the community to receive feedback. The whole tactics of engagement, that will be something that we'll be coming back to council with in consultation with our communications department. So just to emphasize, this is about content. That's the feedback we're looking for right now. Thanks.
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, I think I mentioned already in the last go round that I think that these are all defensible actions that I think the community will find in line with how we've already been making decisions for the last 2.5 years. So nobody would be shocked by the content of this. This has been the dialogue in the community through our communications, our actions, and I would say nobody would be shocked or surprised by this. There will be some elements in the community that want more specific actions in the action plan, you know, so communicating what these mean in terms of specifics, I think will have to be a part of that. But I would have no problem going out tomorrow and talking to the community about each of these priorities. We do it already.
Thank you, Mayor Little.
Councillor Murray's hands up, or sorry, Councillor Hanson was first.
I'll defer to Councillor Murray.
Councillor Murray?
Yeah, where are those questions? I just see I see Councillor Hanson as my view right now. Is there, can we, not that it's a bad view, but
I can see them.
Questions, are they on?
It is the shared screen, and I can see it, but it's,
Oh,
do the actions help us get to the desired outcomes? Do
maybe,
the actions help us address the key issues?
hopefully.
Is council ready to engage the community on this action list?
Sure.
And if you go into the top right corner and click on view and move down to where it says side-by-side gallery, you should be able to see.
There we go. So there are my answers to the questions. Do the actions help us get to the desired outcomes? Hopefully. Do the actions help us address the key issues? Hopefully. Is council ready to engage the community? Sure.
Can I ask you one additional question, Councillor Murray? What do you need in order to change the hopefully into yes? And I think it's a repetition of what you already voiced, but could you summarize what is most important for you in 1 or 2 sentences?
I need to be able to understand that what we did in the past, I need us to learn from our mistakes.
Okay.
Instead of just moving forward, we need to make sure that we address what we did and whether or not what we did worked or not before we keep moving forward. I have yet to feel like we do that.
Yes.
I don't want to repeat mistakes. I want to review what we've done, and if it didn't work with what we envisioned out of the OCP, then let's not keep doing it. Let's change it so it actually does something that we want. You know, a positive thing, Levin, would be that this council is paying attention to truly affordable housing that was lost, that absolutely needs to be replaced. So we have done that. That's a positive action. There's so many other things though that we need to address. So
yeah, and what I really want to respect in your words is how can you as a team learn on really moving the needle into implementation and walk the talk together. And you mentioned a beautiful example on how can we really do that and keep each other's hands and learn from the past in order to improve for the upcoming 2 years. Thank you for adding that. Yeah. Councillor Hanson, you are next.
Yeah, thank you very much. And the answer to the third question from my part is yes. I am ready to engage the community on that action list for the reasons that have already been communicated. The condition, it's not so much a condition, but a wish on my part, is more detail with respect to the action step in about getting our key transportation networks moving. And I emphasize that because it's so important to our community. What is it that we can do that's an action step as opposed to just an advocacy platform, or and if in fact there's nothing we can do to get our key transportation networks moving again, then I think that's a concession we need to make early, because that's what the public, more than anything in my view, are waiting to see us do.
Thank you, Councillor Hansen. So that's one consideration to really take with us, yeah, or take with you, yeah. But I hear a yes to the third question and an important consideration regarding transportation. Who wants to follow on that?
There's definitely hands up, so I'm going to go to Councillor Forbes.
I didn't
Thank
see
you.
this one, sorry. Yeah.
I may have missed something because I missed last week's workshop. As the mayor said, we're, at least speaking for myself and what I hear from other councillors and the mayor, we're already working on these things with the community. So I'm a bit confused. Like, we have a housing task force already set up. So we're already working on some of these things. That's just one example. I'm confused what our end goal of this is. Are we, I mean, I see us doing a lot of these things already. I see us having a lot of these priorities already. I think we're already taking actions. We're already talking to the community. So I'm a bit confused of what the end product of this workshop is looking for.
Mayor Little, can you add to that, or shall I add to that? What's your preference?
Well, I mean, at the end of this process, obviously, it's been a bit of a muted process compared to the full OCP review our plan that we did back 2008 to 2011. And I think when we did our KPMG interviews at the early stages of the council, what we identified was that we weren't looking for drastic change to the plan. We were looking for ways to both achieve some of the targets that were already listed in the plan but had not come to pass yet in reality. And then also, I think, as you've mentioned, try to reflect what we have been doing de facto as a group of individuals on council that we've already been doing. So the plan has to come, the planning reporting on the different 4 white papers has to come to a natural end that leads to these action report. And then we go to the council with these actions as being a priority. They're not, it's not going to be a significant change, but that's what the end goal of this process is that we've reviewed the OCP and we've come forward with what we believe need to be the priorities for the remaining 10 years of the plan.
Councillor Forbes, I see you doubting I see your body language. Can you speak more to that?
Again, I mean, a lot of these things have already been, some of these things were already written into the OCP, which I understand as well is a changeable, movable document. So the ideas were already there. Just, I don't have the slide right in front of me, but most of those ideas were already in the OCP and we've already started taking action plans on them. So it's not like we're going to rewrite the OCP with what's coming out of this meeting. Am I understanding that we're just going to engage the public by saying these are our priorities for the next year and a half that we're going to work on more? I'm confused. Because we're already working on it. And we've already stated just about all of this has already been stated in the OCP. And we didn't follow it. We didn't follow the OCP. So that's why this council has done the 180 turn on some things, and the public already sees that we have done that.
Mr. Stewart?
Let me perhaps try to provide an answer. I think what this council has said is that the OCMP implementation, and I don't want to get into the language of who's responsible for implementing everything, but rather say it has not achieved in some areas the results that we had hoped for at this point. And so I think we're going out to the community to acknowledge that, and that's a point of contention, but I think it's important to acknowledge it, and then say that we've identified some shifts in what we're going to do to better align with the intentions of the OCP. And by the way, we're working on some of these things already, and we'll identify that for the community, as well as I think this idea of understanding where we have control over some things and where we don't. So that's a matter of honesty with the community, which is to say, we had an OTCP with the best of intentions. It hasn't achieved, by anybody's perceptions, what we wanted to for a variety of reasons. We've started to address this council has, there's no question, but we'd like to go back out to the community and say, if we're going to take these actions, these shifts in direction, is that going to be better? Are we actually going to be more aligned with the intentions of the OCP?
So would it be correct to use the word expectations, manage expectations?
And I see your hand raised also, Councillor Bond. So maybe you want to speak to what Councillor Forbes just said?
Yeah, my mouse isn't working. So I guess the thought that's coming up for me right now, Levin, is something that you mentioned in the last meeting, was that, that tension right now. And I will have a child come here in about 4 seconds. So the tension I'm feeling is in the last meeting, you'll have to give me a minute, okay?
Councillor Forbes and all of you, but I think what is transformational for tonight, and maybe Councillor Bonds, maybe I'm just continuing what you wanted to say. Okay, there you are.
Okay.
I first give you the word again, sorry.
So there's a different feeling to tonight's meeting, and maybe that's because we're getting down to coming to agreement on actions. But in our last meeting, we talked about the need for change and the desire for change. And in this meeting, we're saying that there's not actually going to be a significant change. And we were talking about shifts in direction right now, but that they're not actually really shifts in direction. So, like, I'm not getting the perception that what's being presented in terms of actions and changes is actually what we were talking about yesterday. Where we talked about action, we talked about change yesterday, we talked about shifts in direction, but at the same time we're talking about, well, it's not actually going to change that much. It's not actually really going to be a shift of direction. So I'm struggling with that right now.
Yeah.
Can I just make a comment about that, Matt? So, and when I got to the end of last week's meeting, I'm standing out in the hallway here, just chatting with staff, and I had to come to the conclusion that the changes that we're contemplating are reflecting what we're already doing for the most part. We had the discussion last time about dramatic change, and all of the areas we were focusing on for dramatic change, we've already been doing them. We've already been bringing forward and advancing reports that are dramatic change on environment, dramatic change on active transportation. We've had discussions just this last week on dramatic change in housing and built form. And so, again, it goes back to the issue. We haven't been waiting for the OCP to tell us what to do. We've been doing it, and now we need to have it reflected in the OCP. And so yes, we had the discussion about dramatic change, but it was all stuff that we've already been doing for the last 2.5 years. So anyway, that's just my view on it.
Yeah, well, or the last 5 years, right? Like all this stuff was happening before too, right? And so we're continuing a lot of the same stuff. And so, yeah, it's just,
Can I speak to what happens?
yeah, I would like to hear, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, Levi.
What's on the table is very vulnerable. What's on the table is a very inconvenient truth for all of you right now, and for all of us. The big change that you're longing for will not come from the content. The big change will come from the way you are capable as a council to accelerate implementation and to bring actions to the words. And I can sense there's a kind of unsettled feeling in the room, and it could be even feel as a kind of being low on energy. No, what I feel is the unsettled feeling, and Councillor Forbes, you voiced it very beautifully. Is this new? No. What you see as a group is there's a confirmation that you are on track content-wise. What you voiced tonight, which is an inconvenient truth, but it's a massive one that could bring you a huge amount of potential for the next step, is how can you act as council to accelerate implementation and direct the actions in such a way that results are seen and are proven and are there, and bring the right story. And that's a completely different level. And so that's not an unexpected level. I think you all need to see now as council, you're in alignment on the actions. And for God's sake, we were already in alignment for 2 years ago, and we've been discussing for 2 years. What did we discuss? That's quite an inconvenient truth. What you've been discussing is the longing, the collective longing that is coming up tonight, of how can we all be responsible for the implementation of these things instead of talking about them. And so it's time to stop complaining about what's not working. It's time to start focusing together on what will work for our community and how will we bring action into this. And filter that out by monthly meetings or whatever, but having an operational model with each other that helps you implement on what is most precious for the community. And I think the story for engagement, it's very important now to see what kind of engagement do you want. If you're going to repeat this is what we achieved for, and we're going to do the same thing for the upcoming 2 years, just wait and see, that's going to be a wrong message. What I hear you long for, and I'm trying to be the translator of your message. So if I'm not 100% specific, my apologies, but it's trying to bring words to what is in the middle of all of you, is if you could find criteria together for what implementation means and what needs to be implemented, and also what Mr. Stewart brought so beautifully, how you will manage control on the actions. And I think that's the next conversation with all of you. How will you act in a different way as council to make implementation happen much faster than it did in the past? And Councillor Murray, you said it beautifully, it needs learning for you not to repeat the same patterns of the last few years. But once you're going through this, you can be in a completely different space. So the beauty is, yes, to my opinion, I think you all easily say yes to but that's my assumption, to the slide 15 with the high agreement important actions. But you all feel disappointment because, only saying yes to these slides will not make the difference. We will need to say yes in a different way, and we need to act differently from the past in order to make a difference happen, what we long for. And that's another assignment than the one we were striving for now with the OCP. How will we do that? And I think that's the big question, the $100 million question in the middle now is, how can you step into that next level of working as a team, as a council, and as together with staff on that? I would like to hear your reflections on that, because this is quite a profound one. But I would also like to invite you not to be disappointed, because you're in agreement on the most important actions. And imagine that these would all have been completely insanely new actions. That would have been quite strange for a process that has been taking so long already. So I would like to hear some reflections from your end on what I just summarized as what I sense that is happening in the room, but that needs to be brought to another level in order to bring you with the OCP to another level. I see your hand still raised, Councillor Bond. Is that the same hand as previously, or is this one? Yeah.
Maybe it is. I think so. The actions here, like has been mentioned already, are the actions or are the important actions that were highlighted in the OCP. And, they've been achieved or acted upon in one way or another since the OCP was passed, almost 10 years ago now. And, I think even when we talk about implementation and action and seeing results and moving towards that, I would agree. I'd agree in some ways. In some things, we've done a lot of talking for the past 2 years, and in some ways, we've continued actions or started new actions that or highlighted actions. And in other places, we've stopped acting in ways that people didn't seem to be preferable about. But I think in order for us to be a team, moving ahead, implementing, we need to have we have to have a conversation and understanding about what that actually means. Because, my perspective of implementing and acting at speed is going to be completely different than other members of council, and people in the community are going to have the same thing. What's a lot and what's not very much? What is action and what is inaction have different meanings to all of us. And so, I'm not sure if we have a conversation about that now, or we have a conversation about that when we start getting to the actual actions, because, that's going to be important, or else we're going to kind of be stuck into this place where part of the team thinks we're not acting fast enough. Part of the team thinks we're going way too fast. And then we spin our wheels, and in the end, we don't get towards those goals, right? Or part of the team thinks we're going in a different direction. And so, it's, there's a lot of that team dynamic and those understandings about where each of us is and where the community is, or where different parts of the community, because the community is not one whole thing. It's different communities and different people in there that have those same different perceptions that council does. So, but I in terms of your very specific question that you asked, yes, I'm ready to take this to the community for consultation. I think people that have been involved will say, yes, these are the same things that you told us about 5 years ago. They're the same things you told us about 10 years ago. So we need to bring something concrete to it in order to get some meaningful feedback on consultation, right?
Yeah.
That would be my addition.
Thank you so much, Councillor Bond. I would like to ask Mayor Little also a check. It's 7 o'clock. So this would be our end time also. There's still some highlight, also some getting through also to the next steps. Should we first conclude and hear everyone's voice? How much time do we have in this? Do we have some reserve time? What's your suggestion on that? On that point, you're in charge. I'm not.
Yeah, we don't have any other meetings tonight, so it's up to the group whether to spend more time on this specifically. But I think in response to Councillor Bond's comment, I mean, nobody is coming to mutual agreement to blank check support or blank check deny anything going forward. We're all still going to have to come to each individual item with our own mandate, our own ideas. And so when we talk about acceleration, what we're talking about is acceleration and prioritizing of the mutually agreed areas, and not the areas that have ranked as a lower priority for us. What I sort of would expect us to see come out of this is that we will, I guess maybe, that would be a reasonable question, I guess, for Mr. Milburn, maybe as a way to kind of wrap up tonight as well, is do you see the action report taking the form of amending preambles throughout the report, or do you see it as being a guide at the front end? Do you see it as being an attachment at the tail end? I think it goes back to Councillor Forbes's question about what very specifically you want created out of this and how it's going to guide decisions going forward. I think there's been a wealth of listening to councillors' views on things over the last 4 workshops, and I think you've learned a lot more about what we prioritize. But how do you intend to communicate what comes from this as an action report into the OCP and informing future decisions of the OCP?
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to that, Your Worship. I think what we all envision is that we're in the midst of an exercise, a conversation, and we're about to gather some more information for council, including public engagement and including costs, looking at feasibility, and as well as the other criteria that were mentioned tonight. So that would then culminate in an information conversation with council about what are the key actions that would council like to see delivered. Some of those actions might be amendments to existing policies, amendments to existing practices, and that would be specifically laid out in the action plan ultimately, so that the public would see a transparent both list of priority action objectives and also the map of how we can get there. There obviously would be some follow-up. Council may need to approve bylaw amendments, new policies, and so on to actually implement the change that council's asking for or the direction that council's seeking. But the action plan would point us in that direction. It would point us how to resolve those issues. Does that help answer the question?
More or less, I guess I'd be asking Councillor Bond whether that answers his question.
I'm not sure yet. I'm not sure. Yeah.
So Levin, then that's where you're at. So how would you like to use the remainder of the time tonight, Levin?
And I see Councillor Forbes' hand raised. So maybe first giving the word to Councillor Forbes, and then I can answer to your question, Mayor Riddle. Absolutely. Yeah.
I guess I'm kind of still like Councillor Bond is. I'm not quite sure yet of what's going to come out of this, but I do want to say one thing. However we do this, I really, really want public input in this at the same time so that council and the community can talk with each other. Not that we get council's view and then we go out and we get community view and then either staff or council or somebody puts those two together in a report. I want to make sure that there's communication at the same time with community and with council, because otherwise we get segmented. And I think that's the elephant in the room here too, for me, is because of COVID-19, we have not been in the same room with each other, meeting and talking and, everything that goes along with that. So I think that, continuing with the status quo of having one workshop every other week, mind you, we seem to have had a lot of workshops in the last month, but anyway, I don't think we get together enough and actually talk as a council with each other before we have things come up at a council meeting for a motion and a vote. I think we need to talk more. And I think that's I would agree. I think that probably all of us are pretty okay with what you've laid out as actions, but we probably all have a little bit different definition of how to implement them or priority on which ones get implemented. So I think council itself has to be more of a team. We may have the same ideas, but we don't seem to be cohesive about how we go about getting what we want to accomplish for the community.
Yeah.
I don't know how better to explain that. I just think, we've lost some of the connection because of COVID-19. We've lost some of that connection that you get with in-person meetings. Mm-hmm. And I think those are, they added a lot. When you can meet with someone across the table and talk with someone across the table, that adds a lot to that conversation.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes. Yeah. To your question, Mayor Little, like depending on whether there's some other hands raised. No, I don't see any other hands raised. I want to invite you into two spaces now, also as a conclusion for tonight. One is the list that is up front now. So the high agreement important actions. Can you use this as a backbone? So are you all saying yes to this as a backbone? In order to, if this could be a yes from all of you, and I heard a yes from almost everybody speaking with some conditions on going with it. If all of you can say yes to this, we can go to the next stage. What is already going in between? You are worried about the next stage. We don't want to be seen as a next round of only talking. We want to be seen as people that having been implementing in the community. That's the next conversation. I would like, before going there, also concluding on what could happen there, I would like to first finalize this. Is everybody, if I can hear 7 yeses, is this a strong enough backbone? And I would like to bring in the 85% rule. So if you try to reach for the 100%, you're going to remain talking. Is this 85% strong enough for you to act together as a team to a next stage? I would like to hear all of your voices with a yes, and maybe yes if, one sentence, but not two, or no if, no because. That's what I would like to hear first. Very crisp before moving to the other conversation that we are already having with each other at the same time. Councillor
Yes.
Beck, nice to see you again.
Stephen, nice to see you. And I'll just say that, yes, I am supportive of this as far as a framework, a backbone. I share some of the same questions as other members of council in terms of where we go with this, and what it looks like as we see more of the details. But I think this is fairly easy to agree on. It's in line with a lot of the themes of our current OCP and a lot of the work that's been done already by council.
Thank you. That's 1. I count to 7.
Yes, I agree.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. That's 2.
I think I gave
Yes,
you
I agree.
Yeah.
That's 3 and 4.
Sure.
That's Councillor Forbes. You are in the next conversation. I'm coming with you in a second. So yeah, that's 5.
You know, Levin, I was just watching on TV this study about group dynamics. When everyone says yes to something, and then you're like the last person in the group, there's even if you don't agree with it, you're more likely to say yes. it was just something that came up, but to validate, yes, I think these key things as a backbone to build, the rest of the skeleton and the legs and the arms and the fingers and the toes, as you said at the beginning of the meeting. Yes, I think this is a backbone that I can agree on moving forward with.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Bond. And I don't know who we still miss, because I only have the big slide and then the little images of you guys. I think there's still one person that needs to share either a yes or a no, and conditionally or not.
I'm a maybe, and I'm the last person, so I'm not following that rule. I'm still confused where we're going with this, and yes, all of these ideas. Well, a lot of the climate emergency things have come about just in this council's term. It hasn't really been highlighted or done before. I don't know if I say yes, I don't know what I'm committing to. I don't know what the next step is.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Forbes, because this is the confusing thing of tonight. I hear that this needs something else too, because I think about 60 to 70% of what you shared with each other tonight was about how will we do this as a council in order to not to repeat the mistakes of the past and learn from that. And I hear your conditional yes or your conditional no, Councillor Forbes, as I need some more answers to know where this is going to lead to.
Yes.
And I think there's a great process in front of you, but I hear all of you say there's conditions to that process in order to be successful. You want to take control of that process as a council. You want to see it being implemented and actionable and not talk alone. And you want to have it in conversation and close dialogue with the community.
Yes.
And there's the big thing about leadership is strong leadership. And it's not about leadership, it's trust. And it's all about trust building. And I can only share my deep respect for the way we've been in this space tonight. This space is much more difficult and requires much more trust than the space from last week. But trust also with your citizens is created by three things. It's created by be as naked, transparent as you can on what you do know and what you don't know. Be as naked, transparent as you can about what you can control and about what you cannot control. And be also as naked and transparent as you can about what you do and what you won't do. And if you follow that little rule, people follow. And that's what's at stake now. It's also how to have the instruments, as Councillor Murray said, to steer and to navigate now. And I would like to invite you into a conversation in between now as a kind of stepstone. And stepping stone is how will you make sure and agree with each other that how will you implement? How will you take charge for implementation as a council? And I don't know what is needed there. There's a kind of learning from the past in order to improve for the future, but it requires another conversation amongst you as a team to give the criteria to the further rollout of the action plan. That's what I sense. And this is a different conversation, Councillor Ford. So I think for all of you, it's a conditional yes. As long as you're not agreeing on the principles on how you want to implement with each other and are in alignment on these things, you don't really know where you say yes to. If you could come in full alignment on how you're going to implement and what this really means, then you can completely fly to accelerate on the actions, but not before this step has been taken in between. Can you hear what I say? I'm now looking to all of you. I think there's a need for some more clarity on these things before you can move forward and feel the real really yes. That's what I sense.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Lieven. Look forward to us moving forward with this. I think I heard 7 yeses in some form or another, all conditional or all with our own plans for how to achieve them. But I look forward to our next meeting on this. Mr. Stewart or Mr. Milburn, do you have any other closing comments before we cap off the evening?
Your Worship, I think this latter part of this discussion just reflects the unease we all have when we agree on a principle, but we're not sure exactly what the specific goal is, nor how we were going to implement it. And those are later steps. But I've heard for many years that I've worked in the District of North Vancouver, the council is very respectful of the community views and wants to be open to those. And so I think what we need to do is frame a way to get the work that you've done out in the community with the conditions and get that input. And then you can regroup. And based on that input, decide how strong and how important some things are based on that input. I just see that as one of the processes that I've seen time and time and time again in North Vancouver. And I just sense the unease with council, which is to say, how can I commit to something when I don't know how the community views that? And I don't know how important it is to the community. I think that's the natural next step, is to say, this is a draft. This is some work we did. Now community, tell us what you think of it. Are we off the mark? Are we on the mark? And I think that's the next step.
Swiss philosopher named Karl Barth, and Karl's would always say the overarching principle, what ought I to do, which was the sort of, these are my principles, this is how I generally govern my life, but then would also point out that you still have to take that principle and put it into action in every decision that you make. What ought I to do under these circumstances and under these circumstances? And so agreeing to a principle doesn't mean you always are going to agree to everything that may derive from that. You still have to test it at each decision going forward. So there may be an unease, but I think the principles that we've agreed on here today, I think everybody's already been acting under those. And so I think that it's, I look forward to talking to the community about it. thank you, Levin, very much for your assistance tonight. And we look forward to our next discussions and also our community consultation on these action plan items. Thank you, Council. Have a great, I'll accept adjournment.
So moved.
Accepted. Thank you very much. Have a great